Power cuts spell disaster for small businesses like this hair salon in Cape Town.
I've got 16 staff members standing around doing nothing, and I still have to pay them. So a business my size isn't going to survive.
Bigger businesses are turning to other sources of power, including solar. State-owned power utility Eskom started countrywide cuts earlier this month. 40% of the grid's capacity was unavailable due to breakdowns of equipment. One energy analyst says the cost to the economy is around $140 million in revenue a day.
Eskom has a number of linked serious problems. Firstly, corruption has crept into every part of it, into its staffing, into its coal supplies, into its construction of its power stations. Secondly, its power stations are very expensive. The new ones double the price what they should be, the old ones falling to pieces. This has led to electricity increasing by 300% above inflation over the past 10 years.
The government is now racing to prevent the collapse of the power utility before April. In his State of the Nation address earlier this month, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that Eskom would be restructured to try and rescue it from its $33 billion of debt. Union leaders are worried that means privatization and job cuts, and they've called the move a declaration of war. They took to the streets earlier this week and are threatening a nationwide strike next month.
This notion of the private sector that you can have workers out of employment, but the economy can grow, is actually a myth. How is the economy going to grow when there's nobody buying products, when there's no money circulating in the market? So how is the economy going to grow? So we're marching against the economy that is shedding jobs.
The Congress of South African Trade Unions is the ruling party's alliance partner, and some say restructuring Eskom could cost them votes in the national election in May. But this bailout comes just 3 years after the government topped up Eskom's coffers by $6 billion.
Bailout will just allow Eskom to firstly pay salaries, buy coal and survive for a short while longer. But if the restructuring is not implemented, then we will have the same problem again 2-3 years later, except by then there'll be even more damage to the economy.
President Ramaphosa has said there's no single solution to save Eskom. Investors are waiting to see the government's rescue plan for the power utility, factoring in the risk of a ratings downgrade to junk status by Moody's next month. That move would further erode confidence in the economy at a time when it needs all the investment it can get. Melanie Rice, TRT World, Cape Town, South Africa.
And Melanie Rice joins me now from Cape Town. Hi, Melanie. Some analysts are relieved that in this budget the government didn't cave to Eskom's request to take on its massive $33 billion of debt, so they see that as a silver lining. But this bailout is still a huge one nonetheless. Will it manage to turn its fortunes around, though?
We don't know at this stage. There is a task team that has been appointed and still has to deliver a report to President Ramaphosa. But this bailout, almost $5 billion, $1.5 billion a year over the next 3 years, really comes with strict conditions, including a chief reorganization officer who will oversee implementing those recommendations, also oversee the restructuring of Eskom. In the State of the Nation address, the president announced that Eskom is going to be unbundled in order to streamline it. And the finance minister is saying today that Cabinet is reviewing the overall framework for state-owned enterprise support, that there will be very strict conditions, that any support is going to be dependent on the appointment of restructuring officers.
Now, what will this very sizable bailout do to the bottom line? I imagine it'll blow out the deficit by quite some degree.
The biggest problem, what everyone's watching, and certainly Eskom was the major focus point for investors, South Africa spends more than it earns. This year alone, we're going to be spending $17 billion more than we earn. We're borrowing $86 million a day, $15 billion a year. So Moody's, that's set to review our rating status next month, really wants to see that we can meet our debt obligations. And that's not yet clear. This is an election year. Ramaphosa is really kicking the can down the line until he has hopefully a proper mandate after the elections on the 8th of May. But at the moment, South Africa is in deep trouble. But the message from the finance minister today is certainly he believes that it is possible to turn the situation around.
Now, everyone tends to keep an eye out on tax cuts or tax hikes when budgets are delivered. Did we see anything significant on that front?
No hikes, no cuts, and no increase in value-added tax. You'll remember that this time last year, that was raised from 14 to 15% under our now fired Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba, and Tito Mboweni is saying that the hope is that they will get income from tax, that salary increases will mean that more people will fall into a higher tax bracket, they'll meet their tax obligations, and the government is hoping to raise around $900 million through that.
Now, obviously, journalists and analysts are poring over the detail of the budget as we speak, but how has it been received so far?
A mixed reaction. We knew this was going to be a tough budget. Certainly since Ramaphosa took over from Jacob Zuma at this time last year, there have been 4 commissions of inquiry that have really revealed the extent of the rot and the looting and the mismanagement of this country, and under Jacob Zuma's leadership. So many saying it's a balanced budget. We knew it was going to be a compromised budget. And Tito Mboweni himself saying that we really have to plug the rot in order to promote economic growth and get ourselves out of the situation we find ourselves in.
Okay, Melanie Rice in Cape Town, thanks so much for that update.